The shock wave no one saw coming. Forget everything you think you know about gold. Forget the old rules, the predictions, the so-called expert opinions that have filled your news feeds. Because what just happened this week, gold smashing through $4,300 per ounce, wasn't supposed to happen. Not according to the textbooks, not according to Wall Street, and definitely not according to the central banks that thought they had everything under control. But here we are. Gold just hit a level that even the most bullish analysts didn't dare to predict until years from now. And yet, it's happened now. So the question is simple. Why? What's driving this explosive surge when everything else says it shouldn't be happening? Because here's the thing. This isn't just a market move. It's a message, a silent alarm, a signal that something beneath the surface of the global financial system is shifting, and fast. The media will tell you it's about inflation fears, Middle East tensions, or rate cuts coming soon. And sure, those headlines make for neat little explanations, but they barely scratch the surface. The truth is far deeper, more complex, and more unsettling. We're witnessing not just a price spike, but a historic revaluation of trust. Trust in governments, trust in currencies, trust in the paper promises that have held the global system together for nearly a century. To understand what's really happening, we have to strip away the noise. We have to see the system for what it truly is. Because gold's story isn't just about finance, it's about faith. And right now, that faith is cracking. So before we dive into the mechanics, before we talk about central banks, currencies, or interest rates, let's start with the one question no one in the mainstream is asking. Why is the world suddenly running toward gold again? Let's rewind a little. Over the last decades or so, gold has been through every narrative imaginable. It's been called a barbaric relic, a hedge against chaos, and a boomer asset. Analysts dismissed it as outdated. Investors said it was too boring. And yet, through all the noise, gold just kept waiting, unchanged, unyielding, silent. Because gold doesn't need hype. It doesn't need innovation. It simply exists as it always has, pure, scarce, and incorruptible. And that's exactly why it's exploding now. When every other asset in the world is built on trust, trust that governments will repay their debts, trust that banks will remain solvent, trust that digital systems won't fail, gold requires none of it. It's the one thing that simply is. And lately, that's becoming very valuable. You see, behind the headlines, a quiet panic is spreading among the world's most powerful players, central banks, sovereign wealth funds, and billionaires. They're not buying gold because they suddenly like it. They're buying it because they're afraid. Afraid of what's coming next. They see the mounting debts, the rising deficits, the relentless money printing that never truly stopped after 2020. They see interest rates climbing higher, yet inflation refusing to die. They see political instability spreading like wildfire from Washington to Beijing, from Europe to the Middle East. And they know something the average investor doesn't. When trust collapses, everything priced in paper becomes vulnerable. That's why gold's surge this week isn't random. It's the culmination of years, decades of slow erosion in the foundation of the financial world. And here's what makes this moment different. This time, it's not just Western investors buying, it's entire nations. In the last few years, countries like China, Russia, India, and Turkey have been aggressively hoarding gold, quietly pulling their wealth out of U.S. treasuries and into metal. And when those players move, they move markets. Their message is clear. They no longer trust the dollar to hold its value or its power. So yes, the headlines might say gold hits new record, But the real headline should be, "The world is losing faith in the dollar," because that's what this surge truly means. And if that sounds dramatic, just wait. The deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes that this is not a blip, it's a transformation.
In the next section, we'll peel back the curtain on the forces that ignited this historic run, how the global shift away from U.S. debt, political fragmentation, and central bank behavior have collided into the perfect storm that sent gold soaring past every record. So stay with me, because once you see what's actually happening beneath the surface, you'll realize this isn't just a story about gold, it's a story about the future of money itself. The perfect storm behind gold's explosion. Let's start with the simplest truth most people ignore. Gold doesn't rise because it gets stronger. It rises because everything else gets weaker. Every dollar printed, every debt added, every promise made that can't be kept, it all chips away at the value of paper money. And this week, that weakness finally reached a tipping point. Because while the headlines say gold hit $4,300, the deeper truth is that the dollar hit a new low, not in price, but in trust. Think about that for a second. Trust is the foundation of every financial system. If people believe in a currency, it thrives. If they doubt it, even slightly, that system begins to crumble. And right now, the cracks are showing everywhere. Let's talk numbers. The United States is sitting on more than $35 trillion of national debt. That's not just a number, that's a chain, growing heavier by the second. And the government isn't slowing down. Just this year alone, Washington added over $1.6 trillion in new debt in 10 months. The cost of servicing that debt, the interest payments alone, is now higher than the U.S. military budget. Let that sink in. The country that built the strongest army on earth is now spending more to pay interest than to defend itself. Investors around the world see this. They can do math. They know the U.S. can't raise rates forever. They know the government can't keep borrowing at this speed. And they know that when push comes to shove, the answer will be the same one it's always been: print more money. That's the cycle that keeps repeating. And every time it does, gold gets stronger. Because gold doesn't need faith. It doesn't need a central bank. It doesn't even need electricity. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. For decades, the US dollar wasn't just America's currency, it was the world's currency. Countries traded in it, saved in it, borrowed in it. Oil, gas, and commodities, everything was priced in dollars. That gave the US an enormous advantage. It could print the money the world needed. But that system, the petrodollar order, is starting to crumble. In 2023 and 2024, something historic began. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, expanded its influence. They talked openly about creating an alternative trade system, one that doesn't rely on the dollar. And when they started settling oil trades in yuan and gold, the message to Washington was clear: we're done playing by your rules. At first, most analysts laughed it off. They said it would take decades. But look at what's happening now. China has slashed its holdings of U.S. treasuries to the lowest level in 15 years. Russia dumped the dollar entirely after sanctions froze hundreds of billions of its reserves. Even Saudi Arabia, the very heart of the petrodollar system, is quietly signing oil deals priced in other currencies and building deeper ties with the BRICS bloc. And guess what all these countries are doing with the dollars they're selling? They're buying gold. Not ETFs, not futures, physical gold. Tons and tons of it. In 2024 alone, central banks around the world bought over 1,000 metric tons of gold, one of the largest yearly totals in modern history. And according to the World Gold Council, 2025 is already on track to break that record again. This isn't just a coincidence. This is a coordinated migration of wealth from paper to metal. They're not betting on the price. They're preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer untouchable. And when nations start preparing for that world, investors follow. Because if the biggest buyers on earth are moving away from paper money, What does that tell you about the future of that paper? Now, combine that with another ingredient in the storm: geopolitical chaos. Every conflict, Ukraine, the Middle East, the South China Sea, adds a new layer of uncertainty. Every sanction, every trade war, every cyber attack shakes confidence in global stability. And whenever the world feels unstable, people rush to the one thing that doesn't depend on anyone's promise: gold.
That's exactly what we're seeing now. The fear index is rising, currencies are wobbling, bonds are bleeding, and gold, it's thriving. Because gold isn't just a safe haven anymore, it's becoming a statement, a form of silent protest against the fragility of the modern system. So yes, gold's record-breaking surge this week has a technical side: interest rate expectations, inflation data, supply-demand dynamics. But the emotional driver, the one that really matters, is this: people, countries, and institutions have stopped believing in the old order. That's the perfect storm: debt, distrust, and de-dollarization all colliding at once. And the result? $4,300 gold. But if you think this is the top, you might want to think again, because the forces that pushed gold here haven't gone away, they're accelerating. In the next section, we'll uncover the deeper layer: why central banks themselves might actually be fueling the next leg of this gold rally, and what their secret strategy reveals about the future of global finance. The silent buyers: how central banks are rewriting the rules. Let's pull the camera back for a moment. Forget about retail investors. Forget about traders chasing short-term profits. The real story, the one almost no one is talking about, is happening behind closed doors, in the vaults of the world's most powerful institutions. Because while the public argues about inflation, the central banks are stockpiling gold at the fastest rate since records began. And that's not a conspiracy theory, it's official data. Over the last 2 years, central banks have quietly become the largest net buyers of gold on the planet. The same banks that once dumped gold in the 1990s, calling it obsolete, are now scrambling to buy it back at record prices. Why? Because they understand what's coming. They know the global system is changing, not by choice, but by necessity. They know that the dollar's dominance, once unshakable, is starting to fracture. And they know that when trust in paper weakens, gold becomes the anchor of last resort. Think about this for a second. These are the same institutions that issue the money. They can print as much as they want, and yet they're trading that infinite power for something they can't print: gold. That should tell you everything you need to know. Let's look at who's doing it. China's central bank has been adding gold every single month for almost 2 years straight. Their official reserves now exceed 2,300 tons, but experts believe the real number could be far higher, hidden in unreported state accounts. Russia, cut off from the global banking system after sanctions, doubled down. Its central bank now holds more than 2,300 tons as well. Turkey, Poland, Singapore, India, all are increasing their gold reserves aggressively. Even countries in Africa and South America, historically small players, are now joining the movement. It's a quiet revolution, a slow, deliberate shift from paper to metal. And here's where it gets even more interesting. These banks aren't just buying gold to diversify, they're doing it to prepare for what might come next, the new monetary order. There's a growing belief among global policymakers that the current system, the dollar-based one, won't survive the next few decades intact. It's too leveraged, too politicized, too unstable. Every crisis exposes the same weakness. One country's currency is controlling everyone else's future. So what's the solution? A new kind of system, one not based purely on fiat money, but on tangible assets. And that's where gold re-enters the stage,
not as an old relic, but as the foundation of what might be coming next. There's a term floating around in high-level discussions: the gold-linked settlement system. In simple terms, it means nations could begin settling international trade, oil, commodities, even digital currencies, using gold as the underlying standard of value. It wouldn't look exactly like the old gold standard, but the principle would be the same. Money backed by something real, something physical, something outside the control of any single government. And that idea is spreading fast. In fact, within the BRICS bloc, there are already active plans to create a shared payment system that references gold, not to replace the dollar overnight, but to offer an alternative. And as that alternative grows, so does demand for the one thing that makes it possible: physical gold. This is why central banks don't care that gold is already expensive. They're not trading for profit, they're buying insurance. Because in a world where paper assets can be frozen, seized, or sanctioned, gold is the only thing that can't be canceled.
It's the ultimate neutral asset, beyond politics, beyond borders, beyond algorithms. And that's exactly why this week's price spike isn't random speculation. It's a reflection of strategic accumulation at the highest level. When you see gold breaking $4,300 an ounce, you're not just looking at market demand. You're watching a new global monetary foundation being built in real time. But here's the part that the mainstream still refuses to admit. This isn't just a story about nations protecting themselves. It's about the collapse of faith in the institutions that were supposed to protect us all. Because if even the central banks, the creators of currency, are choosing to hold metal over money, what does that say about the system they built? It says they see the storm coming. They know that the next crisis won't be like 2008. It won't be about liquidity. It'll be about credibility. And once credibility is gone, no amount of money printing can bring it back. So the central banks are acting now while they still can. And whether they admit it or not, every bar of gold they buy is a vote of no confidence in the future of fiat currency. In the next section, we'll look at the final piece of this puzzle, the psychological tipping point, why ordinary people, not just governments, are now turning to gold as the last true store of value, and what this mass awakening means for the decade ahead. The awakening, gold's rise and the end of blind trust. Let's be honest, for years most people never cared about gold. It was something their grandparents talked about, something old-fashioned investors mentioned in the background while the rest of the world chased crypto, stocks, or AI startups. Gold was the quiet observer, sitting in the shadows while the noise of modern finance filled the stage. But now, it's back in the spotlight. Not because it changed, but because the world did. People are waking up. They're starting to realize that the rules they were taught, the idea that money always holds its value, that governments always protect your savings, that banks will always be there, those rules are being rewritten in real time. Every financial crisis leaves a scar. 2008 shattered our faith in banks. 2020 destroyed our belief in temporary money printing. And now, 2025 is breaking the last illusion that the global monetary system is stable. Because when gold hits $4,300 per ounce, it's not just a number, it's a signal. It's the world's way of saying, we don't trust the system anymore. Look around. Ordinary people, not just billionaires or central bankers, are buying gold coins, small bars, digital gold accounts, anything they can to feel secure. They're not speculating, they're protecting themselves. They've watched governments print trillions out of thin air only to see their purchasing power disappear. They've seen prices rise, currencies weaken, and politicians promise that everything's fine. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice says, "This can't go on forever." That voice is spreading. In Europe, families are buying gold jewelry not as decoration, but as protection. In Asia, banks are creating gold-backed savings plans for ordinary workers. In Africa and the Middle East, gold trading has exploded as people lose faith in paper money. And in the United States, once the proud guardian of the world's currency, People are lining up to buy physical bullion again, just like their grandparents did during the Great Depression. It's not greed driving this, it's fear and wisdom. Because deep down, humanity has always known one truth. Empires rise and fall, currencies come and go, but gold endures. And that's why this moment matters. Gold's surge isn't just a financial event, it's a historical turning point. It's the quiet sound of the old system cracking. It's the whisper before the storm. It's the world preparing for whatever comes next. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. If governments, banks, and billionaires are all protecting themselves with gold, what about you? Do you really believe the paper in your wallet or the numbers in your bank app will hold the same power 10 years from now? Do you think this endless cycle of debt and money printing can last forever without consequence? Because history says otherwise. Every empire that tried to control money through printing, manipulation, or arrogance eventually faced the same fate: collapse. And in every one of those collapses, gold didn't just survive, it rose.
So this isn't financial advice. It's a moment of reflection. The world is changing faster than most people can see. The system we've trusted for decades is wobbling. And while no one can predict exactly when it falls, the signs are everywhere. Gold's record this week isn't just about price. It's about power. It's about sovereignty. It's about truth. Because gold doesn't lie. It doesn't inflate. It doesn't default. It simply tells the story of every currency's slow decline. And right now, that story is being written in real time, in bold letters, on every trading screen on Earth. So, the next time you see that golden number rise, remember it's not just wealth moving, it's the world's faith shifting. From promises to proof, from words to weight, from paper to gold. And maybe, just maybe, this is the wake-up call we all needed. Because when the dust settles and the charts reset, the question won't be how high did gold go? It'll be who saw it coming and who was ready. So if you want to stay informed, stay aware, and see through the noise before the world catches up, this is your moment. Subscribe to Finance Lens. Hit that like button if this helped you see the bigger picture. Share this video with someone who still thinks gold is just a relic, because they deserve to understand what's really happening. Together, let's keep uncovering the truth, one lens at a time. Because the world may change, but knowledge will always be your most valuable asset.